Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. The Wake County Public School System is taking a deep look at how it serves students with disabilities. District leaders are evaluating how to better utilize staff and tweak processes to improve special education services. They're also looking for ways to improve how the district manages individualized education plans, a source of frustration for many parents. School leaders say the changes are long overdue. WRAL Education Insider Emily Walkenhorst has been digging into the issue, and she joins us now. Emily, good to have you back.
Glad to be here.
You hear complaints from a lot of parents, and services for students with disabilities seems to be a topic that comes up a lot. What do parents tell you? What do you hear?
Right. So, I've heard from a lot of parents of kids with a variety of disabilities, and, they have a lot of concerns, but one complaint that's relatively common among them is just having a lot of IEP meetings, those IEP meetings lasting a really long time, and then, lots of disagreement over exactly what should be in these plans. And what these plans are essentially is, if your child has, let's say, a learning disability, and they have this IEP basically because, that disability is affecting their ability to learn. It's clear that they could be doing better with accommodations, and this plan is supposed to lay out the accommodations this person. Do they need a tutor to help them with this specific learning disability? Some kind of extra services to get them basically to their potential. And there's a lot of disagreement over just what should be in those plans, whose expertise should be consulted, things like that.
Now, Wake County Schools is looking to make some changes to this program. What are they proposing?
So they're proposing a number of things. They're really starting with the structure. Basically, there was a study that they commissioned in 2022. They heard about it in 2022. They received this quite lengthy report from a Boston-based consultant that does these types of reports all the time, that basically said, this is just kind of a mess, the way things are. There's not a lot of structure. There's this complicated chart of, if this, then that just extends, and they drew it out, and it looked a little like a spider web, how it all works. And basically this group was like, you can't do this. There's no, we talked to parents, we talked to teachers, we talked to all these people. There's no clearly defined role. So that's kind of what the school system is doing. They're saying, okay, everybody's going to have this very specific role. It's going to be in their job. So anybody applying for a job come this fall, once they rewrite the job descriptions, is going to know in their job description that this is exactly what you're supposed to be doing for these IEP meetings. And it'll even apply to general education teachers. You're going to know exactly what your role is in making sure that these IEPs are implemented. And specific people are going to be the point person for some of those things. The point person for testing, the point person for the parents to talk to. And so everybody's going to understand what their role is. They're also focusing on training people to be able to actually fulfill those roles, rather than just kind of picking a person and be like, you have expertise in this. Why don't you, do this thing? They're going to have it be a lot more formal now.
Well, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear more about the plan to improve services for Wake County students with learning disabilities. Don't go away. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL Education Insider Emily Walkenhorst about special education services in Wake County. Emily, how do schools in North Carolina measure their performance when it comes to special education?
So there are a couple of different accountability mechanisms. First of all, you kind of have this process of where, parents can file complaints. They can submit due process complaints, which are kind of like lawsuits. And then the state kind of makes a ruling in a lot of these complaints that parents file, or it could be an administrative judge. somebody like that. So there's that level of accountability. Sometimes that can go up to the federal level. But then there's also a layer of federal oversight where you have to be measured on certain things. When a parent thinks their child has a disability, you have to get them evaluated at that point within a certain amount of time. North Carolina sets, their standard at 90 days. The federal standard is actually 60 days, but the state is allowed to measure it over 90 days. And so those are the types of things they're measuring. Are we actually, evaluating kids on time? Are we resolving complaints? If somebody files a complaint, is it being resolved within a couple of months? Or is it taking longer than a year? So, there are a lot of different numbers and different standards that they're measured on.
How's Wake County doing?
So Wake County, in their latest report, they shared, they haven't shared with me yet, their full report. I've requested that. But they shared one statistic they know they're not doing well in. They are not actually completing those evaluations on time. Less than 2/3 of the time, they're doing it in the time frame, and then more than 1/3 of the time they're not. And that's one thing they really want to do better, because when you suspect your child has a disability, you kind of want to get that resolved pretty quickly. So if you're taking longer than 90 days, that can add a layer of stress.
Before the break, you said that some of these changes come 3 years after a consulting firm looked into some of these problems for the county. We talked a little bit about how they mentioned a little bit of confusion over the roles. What else did the consultants say?
Right. They found a lot of issues in the school system. They found communication issues just being a problem. That basically poor communication was very quickly deteriorating relationships between parents and school administrators, almost irreconcilable differences just because of communication issues that just kept getting worse. They also mentioned just a lack of knowledge among a lot of the people who are supposed to be working on these IEPs and making sure that they're implemented. Oftentimes there's a lack of knowledge over, certain rules or best practices or whatever it was. Sometimes schools were just looking for the most knowledgeable person in the school who might be able to help with this problem. And so what they really recommended is, hey, everybody who's working on these things needs to have training in this. And that's something I've even heard from teachers over the last few years, is there are a lot of people who just don't have a knowledge of these things in schools. Some schools might have many teachers knowledgeable, and some might have very few teachers knowledgeable, or the principal doesn't have any expertise in this category, things like that. So there's a lot of complaint over who actually knows what the rules are and what the best practices are.
This consulting report came 3 years ago. Why has this taken so long for them to start working on it?
So there's been some turnover in the leadership department, and not unlike the turnover that's in schools, with a lot of special education teachers quitting and being replaced by new people with less experience in those positions. At the school system level, they've had a few different directors of that department over the past few years. Some just in an interim role or only in there for about a year. So now we have someone, her name is Lisa Allred. She is in charge of that department, and she's the one who said, we're getting this done. And the superintendent, Robert Taylor, specifically wants her to do this. So there's really this directive at the school system level of now, hey, we're doing this. And, we have this person in charge who is doing it. And, over the past few years, it's been more of a rotating cycle of leaders.
When will school leaders know if these changes are working?
So these changes are going to take a while. So they've already started some things, but in terms of defining everybody's role, communicating that role to them, training them to actually have these roles, that's still to be done. So they're spending about a year doing all of these things. And so it's going to be some time after that. You might anecdotally see some things. Maybe some parents might see, these IEP meetings are getting better. They're no longer lasting 4 hours. There's a lot more focus. It's a lot easier to figure out what it is we need to do and how to do it. But in terms of seeing actual data on it, it could be a couple of years. There is, a federal report that comes out every year that, evaluates everybody's statistics, but it's usually, 2 school years behind, 1 to 2 school years behind. And so if they're only just really getting started on a lot of these changes, it'll be a couple of years before we get good, hard data on, whether a lot of their metrics have improved.
Now, what happens if these changes don't work?
Well, if they don't work, you might see, continued issues with state complaints being filed, due process complaints being filed, lawsuits being filed. People have done that before. It can be expensive to file due process or to file a lawsuit, so a lot of people won't, but some families do. We've covered cases from time to time. I know there are other cases that have come out that where it's harder to get our hands on the actual lawsuits or complaints. A lot of them are settled. So there are people who take these actions, and so presumably that would continue at a high rate or whatever the current rate is. If things really don't get better.
Well, we know you're going to be watching as always. Thanks, Emily.
Of course.
That's WRAL Education Insider Emily Walkenhorst for her in-depth report on Wake County Special Education Revamp. Go to the education section of WRAL.com. I'm Jack Hagel. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.